Welcome to the NALFM Accountability Toolkit pre-launch event, Enabling Accountability. My name is Sayed Areen Hussain and I will be your host today. To know more about NALA Feminist Collective, you can visit our website, www.nalafem.org. To drive this conversation on accountability, use the hashtags #NALAFemAccountability and #CSW68. For those watching, please feel free to share comments and questions in the chat box as we go into the conversation. I am happy now to introduce Christine Gathecha, the new Executive Director of NALA Feminist Collective. Christine brings to NALFM a wealth of experience with over a decade dedicated to social impact work and strong commitment to the socioeconomic empowerment of women. As the new Executive Director of NALFM, Christine will lead the team in the implementation of our strategic plan, ensuring that we continue to make significant strides in advancing the cause of gender equality and empowering women. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you, Reem. Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm thrilled to extend a warm welcome on behalf of NALFM to all our partners joining us at this pre-launch event for the NALFM Accountability Series Toolkit. Today is a significant milestone in our 5-year strategy at NALFM. We are committed to building welcoming spaces that promote conversations and cultivate the exchange of tools and best practices for accountability. This toolkit embodies the wealth of knowledge, resources, and calls to action that have emerged from these insightful conversations. Our NALA Council members, alongside funders and member states, have actively participated in shaping this collective effort. We view this toolkit as an open invitation for collaboration between government bodies, civil society, funders, and young feminist organizations, as this is a joint effort to promote accountability. I invite all of you to delve into the exercises and calls to action compiled over the past 6 months. Today's pre-launch sets the stage for the final toolkit, which our team will present at the upcoming CSW, the Commission on the Status of Women, happening in New York next week. And this toolkit is more than a mere launch. It is an invitation and a call to action for each one of us to address accountability within ourselves and with others. So let's explore, let's engage, and collectively champion accountability. Thanks for being part of this journey.
Thank you, Christine. So what can you expect from the toolkit? And we're going to go through a short session where we'll just showcase a bit of the toolkit so you can get a sense. And please feel free to continue interacting on the chat box. And welcome everybody. We're so happy to have you here with us today. If I could just get the slides on the screen, please. So what can you expect from the toolkit? This toolkit is a resource for government, multilateral institutions, young feminist organizations, and funders. This resource will empower African stakeholders with instruments for accountability and collaboration, raising awareness, spurring multi-stakeholder engagement, and promoting best practice. How does it work? It will take you through exercises, checklists, and data that will ensure internally and with partners you internally reflect to ensure honest and effective accountability. You work with community through collaboration, not coercion. You use Afro-feminist participatory approaches to collect data that is inclusive, diverse, and decolonized. And you challenge power and embrace hybridity. How can we help? It will answer the question of how you can help and what role you play in accountability from where you are seated. Therefore, within this toolkit, stakeholders will additionally find clear calls to action to track their progress, answering how can you help in accountability. When do you start? You start right now. We invite you to start now, beginning with yourself, with your organizations, with your institutions, and with your team to internally reflect and evaluate where you are in terms of your power, in terms of your privilege, and in terms of accountability. And if you need help, you will find supporting information and tools to guide you through your journey. In the toolkit, we have case studies, innovations from government, funders, young feminist organizations, and multilateral institutions, where you can seek inspiration and advice. Next slide, please. We thank all our 18 partners who sat with us, shared their knowledge, shared their time in the development of this toolkit. We now invite you to sign up for the first release of the toolkit and stay connected on our social media. So you can scan the QR code. We'll share it again at the end of this webinar, but we will also share this presentation and the slides in the chat box for you to go through as well. So today we're happy to sit in conversation with partners and leaders in accountability on gender equality to highlight the importance of young women-led accountability processes. We are thrilled to have with us today Lopa Banerjee, the Director of Civil Society Division for UN Women. Welcome, Lopa. Magdalene Majuma, the Executive Director of Mshana Empowerment Korea. And Rose Washuka, our NALAFEM Council Chair. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Rose. I'd like to turn the first question to you, Lopa. As we head to CSW, which is next week, what can we expect from this year's negotiations, and what guidance can you give feminist movements as they plan for their advocacy?
Thank you very, very much, Saida. And many, many congratulations to NALAFEM for launching this accountability toolkit. It comes at such a crucial time in terms of our work, this moment in time, as we head into both the Commission on the Status of Women and this moment in time when such a large part of the world is going in for elections, whether those are local elections or national elections. It is a moment in time when the largest cohort of people, almost 30 to 40% of the world, are heading for elections. And so this Commission on the Status of Women, with its focus, with its priority theme on addressing poverty and inequality and financing for gender equality through a review, through reviewing the suitability, the fit for purposeness of financial institutions, this becomes such a critical moment. So what to expect from this CSW? To expect the critical discussions that are going to take place on, of course, addressing poverty, but addressing the aspect of strengthening institutions, looking at maximizing financing, and then very, very crucially, to look at the multidimensional aspects of poverty, to look at the multiple inequalities that exacerbate poverty, and to focus on urgent, action-oriented, and funded responses, policy responses that are effective on the ground and that we can actually link with this moment when the world is going for elections. And on every electoral agenda across the different countries, the issues of poverty and inequality remain central as governments struggle in this moment of crisis and conflict all over the world. And so the advancement of our shared goals for gender equality, women's rights, and the empowerment of women and girls everywhere becomes so critical to this conversation, both at the national level and its link with what is going to be discussed at the Commission on the Status of Women, so that we take the Commission on the Status of Women home to our communities, and that to your point of accountability, that the policies that are discussed, The policy frameworks that are discussed at the Commission on the Status of Women find resonance in countries through this moment of accountability and elections.
Thank you so much, Bopa. I think, it's really powerful, just acknowledging that this, yes, so many of our countries are, like you said, going into elections, and elections being, I think, one of the pivotal moments where we do hold our governments accountable, and we sort of take stock as well of where we have reached, and reflect on where we are going. And I'd like to turn, on that note to you, Rose. Rose, who, you sit very interestingly within this space of being an activist and an advocate, but then also being very much part of government. And thank you, just to our viewers, Rose has made the time from many government meetings to be here today. So thank you for that, Rose. But I'd like, for you to maybe just expand on that dynamic and what you see between these two worlds, because this is something that the toolkit tries to do. It's a toolkit that is placed for government at the same time of young feminist multilateral institutions, so all these different stakeholders. What is that thread that runs across all these institutions, as different as they are?
Thank you very much, Reem, and thank you very much to everybody who's joining us. Greetings from the NALA Council members, wherever they may be. We share our solidarity with everybody who's joining us, and it is important to have this conversation so that we can actually see to it the importance of having that accountability run across that thread. And Reem, you're right that I see it in this intersectional world, but not so much intersectional as a part of a continuing thread, because when I was thinking about why it is important to remain and push for accountability in the implementation of the commitments that we have made, I was thinking about what is needed and what is necessary, and what I've observed, having been an activist in working with young people, sisters and brothers across the world, but also sitting in the policy making and implementation seat in government. And what I have observed is, one, there is a threat of discontinuity. There is a threat of exclusion. There is a threat of having too many policies without really tangible funding, tangible financing, understanding of needs, understanding of the landscape, especially just losing the grassroots and losing our change makers at the local level. And I have understood that when we sit in this space, whether you are in the civil society, in the private sector, or in government, it is important to understand why it is important to push for accountability and what you need to push for accountability. One, you need knowledge. And knowledge is, know the policies, know the data, know the gaps, know who is sitting where and who's moving which pieces. And then once you have the knowledge, you have then to think about networks. Where are your champions? Where are the champions around the globe? And what can we do to make sure that we are all coming together around implementing a goal? And once you understand the networks and where those networks are within and outside of government, then you're able to sort of track what has been done. You're able to champion and push for policies that are stuck to be unstuck, because sometimes all it requires actually is one person to move the file from a point of no movement, or to move a policy from paper to practice. The next thing that you actually need to understand is a trust. And trust is building trust. Why is it that we want that continuum as opposed to disjointed pieces where one is pushing the other. And situating interests and the interest of all of us as a unit. It is important to build trust, and that's why it's important to actually check and be in that continuum, whether it is in the private sector or the civil sector, or in government, or crossing all of them, especially because of the the numerous aspects and the interconnectivity of the challenges we are facing today. Finally, is power. And I'll speak a little about power because we think that power is only entrusted to others. But actually, power is also entrusted to ourselves. And sitting around and waiting for permission to be invited to push for the full implementation of the Maputo Protocol, or generation equality agreements, or international, national, regional laws that have been put together for gender equality. Just understanding that in the individual there is power, but in the collective even more. And Reem, I've realized that once you allow yourself or your constituency to be disempowered to donate or to relegate your power, to challenge or to push for implementation or to question status, you not only disempower yourself, but essentially that energy sort of boomerangs to others. And so from where I sit, those 4 incredible competencies have proved to me critical, particularly when you are, when we are building our capacity to push for accountability. Knowledge, trust, networks, and power. Personal power and the power in the solidarity, which is why this conversation, this toolkit is so critical, so that we are all aware of one, what are we measuring? Why is it important that it's decolonized? Why is it important that it is organic, that it follows needs at community level, at national level, at regional level, within context? And why is it important that we think of it in ways that also decenters patriarchy? So knowledge, trust, networks, and power Reem have proven to be great competencies to build around a movement towards equality, accountability.
Thank you so much for that, Rose. And on that note, I'm happy that we have Magdalene Majuma here with us, who's a partner of NALAFEM. Magdalene Majuma, who is the Executive Director of Msichana Empowerment Kuria, a young women-led grassroots organization in Kenya that has actively worked towards building a healthy and safe community for young girls and women free from harmful cultural practices and sexual-based violence. And Magdalene, Msichana Empowerment Korea, has recently, come up with this, I think, also amazing research on girl-led advocacy. And there's been a lot of, movement that we're seeing, and, we also expect going into CSW, seeing this as well in terms of advocacy around adolescent girls' co-leadership in processes. And I just wanted to ask you, as member states, civil society, and youth-led organizations seek to better engage girls towards driving accountability, what are some of the things that we need to be mindful of in terms of safeguarding these girls?
Thank you so much, Sidiam. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm really, really humbled and honored to have us to be part of this amazing conversation. And I was really intrigued by Rose's sentiments. And back to my question is that we look into the voices of the girls. Are they really being heard? Are they being listened to? or is it just a question of saying this is what accountability looks like, or this is what the girls are supposed to do? But then as an organization and also a youth-led member activities, it's more about ensuring that these girls' voices are heard in terms of making sure that they're parts of the decision making and looking into their day-to-day lives. How does that look like on their end? Do they really understand what life really looks like in their day-to-day life and the situations that they face every day? I would say, like, for example, when girls are molested or mutilated, or they face challenges of teen pregnancies, many of them back in time, they were not able to speak or voice this out because they did not understand if this is really something that they should speak about, or is it or in their hands to talk about these issues. But through the safe spaces that we engage with them and the involvement that we have with the young girls, it has enabled them to champion their voices through school clubs and also within the community. You'll find that I would say, like, for what just happened 2023, we anticipated FGM, but to our surprise and to our happiness is just that more girls were able to reach out to the children's department and report cases, and also be sure that other girls are safe from FGM. And in the situation whereby girls have got teen pregnancies, you realize that many girls have been able to speak up about the day-to-day occurrence in their lives. And talking about that, we say that we look deeper. For us, we dive deeper into the voices of the girls and giving them power into their hands to enable them understand that these are things that they can really speak about them. And when they speak about these day-to-day lives in their situations, that is whereby we say that already they have the power in their hand. And then for us, education has played a big role. That's when I speak about education here, I'm talking of in and out of school, because with the girls that we engage at our community level, not every girl has got the opportunity to successfully transition from primary school to high school. But then with the information that they have, they've been able to then realize that they are also they play a key role in safeguarding their rights and also airing out what does not sit right to them as young girls. And to continue with that, we've been able to support them or champion their opinions. And just like what you've shared in the recently concluded girl-led research, the girl-led research was inspired in the sense that, many times when we sit in the boardrooms, when we sit in meetings, it's always about girls this, girls that. But then through the girl-led research, we were able to understand what really are the key roles that they play into the implementations of programs, and also the policies that are within the setting of our community. And they're able to really unpack them bit by bit and also understand. So with the research, it was more of bringing the girls' voices and not just saying that they're the ones we are speaking on behalf of them, but then what does that look like and what does that entail? So we really, really were so pleased when we brought this on board and they were able to air out and also talk to their day-to-day issues and what does that look like at an implementation level, be it at the county government, be it at the organizational level, and also at the community at large. And I'm so thrilled and happy, and thank you so much, Nala. It was an amazing journey, and I'll say it is an amazing opportunity for us to also look into the accountability toolkit and unpack more of what it entails and how that can support our work with the young girls and young women in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Magdalene. And just to add on what Magdalene was saying, that the toolkit has documented a lot of these innovations that are within the realm of gender equality, but also innovations that are outside of it, where we can, as different stakeholders, seek inspiration, best practices, and methods as well. I'd like to bring Lopa back to the stage to speak a bit more about CSW. We've been talking for the last 6 months, saying that we're leading up to CSW, we're leading up to CSW. But a lot of people, I think, when we think about CSW, think about it in terms of a temporarily, moment, right? An event, an annual event, but don't really think about the strategic nature of CSW in terms of it being for policy formulation. And maybe we don't really understand or haven't been able to engage a bit more on the key issues and how we use CSW as a moment of accountability and use the decisions that are being made at CSW to hold our governments accountable to some of the policies that they have come up to. So my question is, so what are these key issues this year on the table as the final drafts are being concluded? And how can we, as young feminist organizations, navigate the space and continue pushing for code-driving accountability?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Reem, for that. So, as you know, the Commission on the Status of Women every year looks at sort of three kind of topics, three themes. What is called the priority theme, what is called the review theme, and then what is called the emerging issue. And this year, the priority theme is on accelerating the achievement of gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls by addressing poverty, strengthening institutions, and financing with a gender perspective. And the review theme, meaning it reviews a theme that was a priority theme in a previous CSW, and it reviews how much progress has been made on that theme in countries that adopted those policies. So it becomes a moment of accountability for that previous theme. And the review theme this year is on social protection, which was a priority theme some CSWs ago. And so that link as well between social protection and the issues of poverty and inequality and the gendered dimensions, it becomes so crucial. And the emerging issue is on AI and the gendered approach to AI and how it affects women and girls, and accountability for AI that is responsive to women and girls. And that, again, is such a central piece of our, not only our lives overall, but again, at this moment of global elections, when almost 60 to 70 countries are going in for elections, either at the national level or at the local level. And the issue of AI, the issue of technology, will be so central in the ways in which it is used effectively and in the ways in which it spreads misinformation, disinformation, and compromises the democratic processes and the ability of young women and girls to be able to participate at this moment in time. So, with that in mind, looking at this year's Commission on the Status of Women and its key areas where we are seeking policy responses from policymakers that then have a critical impact on the lives of young women and girls in the communities. And you are absolutely right, Reem. This is not a moment in time. While it takes place for 2 weeks in March in New York, the process leading up to it, the manner in which the priority theme and the policy frameworks are discussed is a year-long process. And most importantly, once policymakers, governments adopt what are called the agreed conclusions, the policy framework coming out of CSW, The most important aspect of that is how that then gets taken back into the countries, and in terms of implementation at country level, and to be able to hold those policymakers accountable for the commitments that they have made on this priority theme in New York, in their communities. And again, these elections provide such an important moment for that. But what are some of the critical issues that are going to be discussed? First of all, to lay out what is the state of the manner in which women and girls experience poverty. The fact that poverty is a gendered phenomenon, with women and girls overrepresented among the world's poor. Today, more than more women and girls live in poverty than men, with 1 in 10 women living not only in poverty, but what is called extreme poverty. And the fact that this gender poverty gap, unless we take critical measures to address it, is likely to persist through to the mid-century. The second is the aspect of the multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination that intensify women and girls' poverty. And the fact that in times of crisis, we are a world that is living in deep crisis. And there is more conflict and more crisis, whether that is related to climate, whether that is related to war, humanitarian crisis, displacement, and how much more women and girls are being pushed into poverty as a result of that. And the key focus that unless we take accelerated, urgent action, we are not going to be able to address this in any significant way. And so the critical aspect around strengthening the financing and institutions in countries that are addressing the gender dimensions of poverty and that are impacting the lives of women and girls who are living in poverty. First of all, in terms of the international financial architecture, the fact that this financial architecture, the multilateral development banks, the various ways in which trade takes place in the world, the manner in which taxation happens, this international financial architecture is not fit for purpose. It is not fit for purpose for today's world. It is certainly not fit for purpose for a world that is driven so much by crisis. So to be able to look at a reform, at policies that make the international financial architecture much more responsive to the needs of women and girls, and to be able to free up debt relief so as to be able to free up public space for policies to come in, looking at progressive taxation, gender responsive budgeting, and making sure, so critically, one of the most important things, that there is investment to women-led and girl-led organizations that are doing the work at the community level, and to be able to uplift that, support that, including through investment in gender data that gives us the knowledge that Rose spoke about earlier, that gives us the knowledge to be able to develop these policies and solutions. And so for this CSW, these critical aspects of institutions strengthening, maximizing financing, and urgent action that policymakers can take in New York when they meet to develop these policy frameworks, and then when they are going back to their countries at this moment of election, to make sure that these get back onto the electoral agenda. And for all of you who are going to be there at CSW, both there in person and participating in virtually and in hybrid modalities, to be able to engage with these policymakers, to make sure that you work in a spirit of collaboration, contributing to the negotiations, so that your relentless advocacy is able to drive the urgency for this collaboration as we go forward. And one other point, that the CSW, as you say, is not a moment in time. So it continues following through this process when these turn into programs and initiatives on the ground. But also, we are at a time of some critical global moments. We are going into next year, will be 30 years after the adoption of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. So right now, countries are also in the process of reviewing their commitments to the Beijing Declaration. So we are leading into Beijing Plus 30. This year will also be the Pact for the Future, and that's the Secretary General's, UN Secretary General's, Our Common Agenda. And you know there will be the Pact for the Future discussions. There is going to be the civil society conference in Nairobi, leading into the Pact for the Future. So all of these discussions that are taking place, including the commitment to come up with a set of framework discussions on future generations, linking this to what is happening at CSW, to the policies that take place at CSW, will be so crucial as young people engage with their policymakers in this in the 2 weeks of CSW in New York in March. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lopa. There's so much power in sitting and being in conversation, and in multi-generational spaces where we reflect, where we share, and where we enable and empower each other. And this is something that we've tried to do over the last 6 months at NALAFEM through this webinar series, now culminating in this toolkit, as a methodology as well of what it looks like what Afrofeminist accountability and methodologies and data collection and collaboration looks like. So I'd like to hold space for some of those voices of these amazing women, young women who have been part of these conversations before we move on. And while we share and just celebrate their voices, I'd like to encourage you, people who are watching on this platform, to please share your comments and questions in the chat box, and we will give you space to have those addressed. So take a look.
The first step is always talking about it, then looking at how can we collaborate to actually make this happen.
I know that for a long time, for a young African woman to travel to New York, the access to a visa is an issue, the travel support is an issue, the language used in the UN is an issue.
Come together when we are learning from each other, when we're learning from each other's tactics or each other's strategies, when we're coalescing as one collective, we're much stronger and more effective in how we're showing up. And
it cannot be left to individuals to decide that we want to be accountable within those systems. We've got to institutionalize those.
Accountable. There is a responsibility from those that are on the ground demanding change. There is a responsibility that has to come from their side.
We have these excessive requirements coming from donors about demonstrating the impact. Being able to constantly come back in these very short time frames and say exactly what has been achieved, it's not realistic to the kind of work that's being done.
Trans people and supporting anti-trans hate, and you're getting money from them. What are you doing?
Because once you hold yourself to account, you start seeing the things that you do that are so colonial, that are based on you taking advantage of your power structure.
Believe more funding towards youth and feminist movements will be able to lead to actual change for the most underserved in our communities.
We have youth, civil society, member states, private sector, philanthropies, all at the table in spaces that were not accessible before to all of them.
Where people just come together, pat each other in the back and say, wow, we all really want gender equality. Look at us doing all of these amazing promises. The question is, where's the reality landing?
So, Rose, I'd like to turn my next question to you as we receive comments coming in on the chat box. Like, I think we have expressed consistently going into every month of this webinar, there has been this undertone of exhaustion by many young feminists who are joining the conversations, and calling into question the effectiveness of accountability processes. And so I'd like to ask you this question. It might be a very heavy question to ask and to be able to answer, but what is the future for better, effective accountability that really does speak truth to power? And what we're seeing today is interests.
I think, Reem, it is true that we've been seeing, first of all, an attitude that focuses attention to the lesser volatile areas around the world and not sustained action. And at NALAFEM, we have been talking about the importance of having young women-led accountability as far as gender equality is concerned. And we can think of reasons why that is important. It is important because despite inclusion at intermittent level, at these high level decision-making spaces, we need to ensure ownership. And ownership means that policies speak to every person wherever they may be. Because when we draw international instruments, regional instruments, and national instruments, implementation takes context. It can either be implementable or totally non-implementable. And it is important to remember this as we go into CSW, that there are young women, young girls, children who are fully not able to realize the commitments that we make at the international level because the context is completely unpalatable. And so it's important to remember that those voices are important voices and they need to be part of the process and they need to own the process. Secondly, we need to depoliticize interventions, but also build political solidarity. And it seems like an oxymoron. But what we mean by this is in order for us to have sustained commitment, we must go into interventions, not because they are in vogue, not because they are selling, not because they're attracting funding at that particular point in time, but because it is the right thing to do. It is the urgent thing to do. And then we need to build political solidarity around sustained commitment. And I think the exhaustion that we are seeing is because that sustained commitment is lacking, because we are jumping from priority A to priority B in half a second. And so we need to sustain that. Fourth is we need to remember that in order to be successful, we must consciously decenter patriarchy, even in the process of putting together the policies and processes of engagement and even of accountability. Because patriarchy deepens the more work is put in. And it is important to understand that consciously we must understand that our economic systems, our political systems, our family systems, our communal systems, because they are colonial, because we haven't decolonized them, they still center patriarchy. And it is important to be very conscious that the policies that we implement must decenter patriarchy. Fifth is that evidence-based decision-making is important, and I will not belabor the importance of data. There are areas that require education to realize progress, but there are areas that require healthcare. There are areas that require peace efforts. There are areas that require hostility cessation. And so it is a contextual application, and one size does not fit all. So it's important to use evidence to understand how we're moving in. And that leads me to my sixth point, which is contextualized adaptation. We need to put power into our governments, our civil society, our citizens to contextualize the adaptation of these international instruments. And I think that bringing regions together, bringing bodies together, continuing to meet in New York once a year, it's important, but we need to do more than that. We actually need to go into the regions, we need to go into the villages, we need to go into the schools, we need to put money and more power into young people, which is why NALAFEM is so passionate about resourcing, sharing the minute resources that we have with other grassroots feminist organizations so that they can go the distance, they reach where we cannot. And we need to see this action coming really from the leadership when they meet this month. 7th is global sensitivity around conflict, around war, and how polarization affects implementation and inclusive societies. And that is the elephant in the room, and we must confront it, especially because we know women and young girls are affected adversely by conflict, by war. We must really center that. And we must call this by name. We must call targeting by name, and really we must challenge. If we can take on patriarchy, really we can take on polarization and win the war. 8th is permanent prioritization of gender equality and gender sensitive globalized action. And again, it ties towards sustained momentum, sustained prioritization, permanent prioritization. It needs to be in every room, in every conversation, in every funding document, in every treasury circular, in every government priority. We need to sustain this because, as I said, our economic systems, processes, politically, patriarchy is continuing to entrench. And we are seeing exclusion of women, of young girls, of persons who identify differently, the more that we sustain action. And so this has to remain a permanent priority, including as far as funding is concerned. So what are we financing? When we finance climate change, where are the resources going? When we finance education, where are the resources going? Curriculum development. When we reform our economic systems, are we sensitive towards what that is doing to ensure that this section of society that has been marginalized for decades and centuries continues to find ways to really ensure that our systems are more inclusive? 9th is economic honesty and accountability. We know that economies are built on the brows of women and girls, but we also know that they benefit only a small fraction of society who are not women and or young girls. And so if we can have honest economic conversations to say that let us channel resources where they ought to go. Let us put budgets where they should be. Let us also make sure that the stringent, we are not saying that let's not pursue accountability for utilization of resources, but we're saying don't make it impossible for young feminist organizations to utilize resources and funding from the international community. But we are also saying that let us also make sure that governments and money is coming from where it needs to come. We need to look at the entire resource ecosystem and ask ourselves, really, are we just talking shop? Or are we putting money where our mouths are? And I dare say we are in between. We're not doing too badly, but we're not doing great either because we're not resourcing young feminist organizations to do the work that they must. And it's in a different generation. My mentors pushed the Beijing Declaration. I am blessed to come from Nairobi where Kenyan women really push these things and I stand on their shoulders, but I continue to see the intergenerational gaps and the baton is not passing and hasn't been passed appropriately. So who's also giving the statements in New York? And how is that accountability and multi-generational approach working? Finally, can we have ceiling-free approaches? I do not want to be celebrated because I have broken a glass ceiling. I want to be celebrated because I am in the room, because that is enough. And so can we put enough young women everywhere in the room to give us their localized adaptation proposals? Can we put them in the room to tell us what their funding needs are? Can we put them in the room to decenter patriarchy? Can we put money into their hands so that we can make our economic systems honest for this work to be successful? And the totality of that will be a decolonized approach. Reem, back to you.
Thank you so much for that, Rose, and I'm sure that everybody has made a note of those very powerful 10 points or reminders. I'd like to give space to someone in the chat box who shares. So she's Ebomesang from Cameroon, who shares that she reiterates the sentiments of Magdalene about decision making and the voices of young women and girls. And she goes on to share that, and maybe Magdalene, you can speak about this as well. But please, can their voices be heard based on the fact that there is a lack of finance too, and some of them even lack the knowledge on how to speak. So I think she's speaking to the fact that, you know, as we're advocating for more inclusivity beyond just these moments of, or these events or meetings where we ensure that we have, or the practice that there's been a tick of the box that girls are included. But how do we ensure, I think, like Rose is saying, sustained inclusivity, where young girls are really at the forefront, also acknowledging that as they are young advocates, they will move to being youth-led advocates. So how do we really sustain this transition and ensure a smooth transition from girl-led advocacy to youth-led advocacy to young women-led advocacy, and so that we don't lose these very powerful voices along the way?
Oh, thank you so much, Sidian. And I think I'll dive into the voices and to their decision making. I would say, like, for example, as an organization, a young women-led organization, it is more about planning, listening, and designing with the girls. I would say that globally, countrywide, and also at a county level, many times you find that an organization, it is more about what you sit down, draft, and feel that this is the need of the community. But then we are moving past that in the sense that we have to have these conversations with these young girls and young women and make sure that we really understand, we put them at the center of decision making. In the essence, I'll give an example like what is currently happening in my community at the grassroots level. It is that working in a community whereby FGM was more of a cultural practice. So every person coming to Korea, anybody hearing about FGM, it was more of like, let us end FGM. Can we stop FGM? But then when we took a backseat and said, can we listen to the girls? Can we design with them? We realized that there are so many underlying conditions around FGM, teen pregnancies, and also child marriage per se. So from this point, we came to realize that once a girl has been mutilated, I would say so, this girl is perceived as eligible to get married. And in the process, you look at the family that is pushing this girl to mutilation and also to child marriage. It is more of they don't have the resources. Like from the voices of the girls, it is that even if I don't go through the cuts, and I'm here at home, what am I going to do with myself at home the whole year when my fellow girls, my peer girls are already going to school? So we realized that there was a gap, and the gap here was education. So from the voices of the girls, we realized that education is key, and they really need to be given that opportunity to design. And when we design about like around education, again, it's more far-fetched from the normal norms of education of going to primary school, high school to tertiary. It is more of, what do I really need to do now as a young girl? Maybe probably example is a young mother. is she really ready to go back to high school, or does she want to do something different? Maybe join polytechnic, do some skills that can help her manage her life and also the life of her young one. So when we talk about decision making, it is broad in the sense that we make sure that these girls are at the center of every program that we are doing. And this would apply even, like, let me say, the ongoing, the planning for the CSW, and Rose has really put it across. Many times more organization would preach and put their first foot front to go to CSW, but then you're going to the CSW, and who are you going to speak on behalf? So can we have these opportunities? Can we have slots for girls to speak for themselves? What exactly do they need? How can they be supported to go about what their needs? Other than saying, you need sanitary towels. I think I'll bring you a lorry full of sanitary towels. Maybe that sanitary towel is not their need. But listening to them and making sure that we really, really do dig deeper and understand their needs and design everything with them, that is putting their voices, giving them power to their voices and putting them at the front of decision making. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Magdalene. So something that we do here on this series is we invite our speakers to complete the sentence, I am Nala because, and we really do this, just also reflective of some of the processes and the exercises in this toolkit to really begin with ourselves in a space that acknowledges the power of womanhood, the power of our collective. And in that spirit of our toolkit, which we celebrate today, I invite our speakers, and maybe we can start with you, Lopa, to complete the sentence for us. I am Nala because...
I am Nala because without the support of women and girls and standing with sisters in solidarity, we cannot take any further steps forward.
Thank you, Lopa. Over to you, Rose. I am Nala because...
I am Nala because a power...
I think Rose is frozen. So as we get Rose back with her connection, we'll move to Magdalene. Magdalene, I'm Nala because...
I'm Nala because for every girl is a voice, a choice, and the agency to understand the policies and work with the policymakers as a girl. Thank you.
Thank you, Magdalene. And I think Rose is back. Hi, Rose. I think we lost you a bit.
Hi,
I am Nala because...
How did you...
Yes,
Sorry, you lost me. I am tempted to see I am Nala because I am here.
Thank you so much, Rose. And thank you to our great panel for sharing such valuable insights with us today. And to everybody who logged in to sit with us, to celebrate this toolkit, to try out a few of the exercises, to share your comments. Everybody, signing in from, I'm seeing in the chat box, Nigeria, Kenya, Sierra Leone, Cameroon. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining the NALFM community. And we hope you enjoy using this toolkit and invite you to share how you are using the toolkit and give us your feedback in terms of what you would have liked to see in it or what you've enjoyed using. And please join us in our next webinar on April 5th for the start of a new accountability series, where this time we will be going country by country, hosting barazas with government, civil society, and young feminist organizations. So as usual, if you'd like to be on the webinar or would like to recommend speakers, please reach out to us on email on facilitator@nalafem.org, and please stay tuned on our social media platforms for more information. Follow us as well on social media and continue to use the hashtags #NalafemAccountability and #CSW68. And I think, like all the speakers has shared with us today, please do follow the negotiations, the decisions that are being made leading up to next week's CSW, and keeping track of what is happening post CSW 68. We will meet every first Friday of the month and can't wait to see you all next month. Bye, everybody.